Welcome to What You Gotta Say. Now, this is going to be something new for a lot of you who have been watching us. You're going to see through our feed a phone number. And during the course of the day, we'd like you to call in because we want to hear one of the most important voices and opinions that matter. That happens to be not mine, but yours. But here we go again. We are not out of May. This year alone, we've had 232 mass shootings. Here we go again. Let's get at it. And we're going to get at it in 2 minutes, 2 seconds.
To small business. That's a great way to have generational wealth. If you're a minority business, you may be struggling to keep your head above water. Why? In 2019, the Black community spent $1.5 trillion because the Black dollar lifespan, 28 days Asian communities, 19 days Jewish communities, 6 hours a month in the Black communities. Major brands target the Black media, TV, and radio. That's why Blacks are brand shoppers. That's why they get a big slice of that $1 trillion pie. Your business needs exposure. You got quotes from cable networks and local radio. They charge a lot of money for a little exposure. Networking and social media is a full-time job to get part-time money. Let's look at a successful Black business model. Remember Soul Train? It was a new Black TV show that Johnson Cosmetics increased the exposure of Afro Sheen and made billions of dollars for Bobby Johnson. Where are you going to find a good show for a low price? We have a talk show called What You Got to Say. What You Got to Say is a Black-owned talk show streaming live on YouTube channels, Facebook Live. What You Got to Say has a diverse audience from 18 to 62 years old, and their gross income range from $32,000 to $122,000 a year. That exposure will get you a good slice of the $1.5 trillion. Tell us about your business. Maybe able to get on our Black-owned spotlight. In 4 weeks, your business can go from surviving to thriving. To find out how you can get what's yours, email sales@squiresignage.com. They're waiting to hear what you got to say.
Here we go. Here we go again. Another mass shooting in America. This is getting to be way too popular and too common, to the point where I think the majority of us have become desensitized. But before we get into that, I want to bring on my guest host for today. He has a lot of time. He is a United States Army major, chaplain of the National Guard installation. She is also a reverend with a doctorate's degree. Not only does she have one doctorate, but she's working on her next. She's also one of the stars of the Three Wise Men. And by the way, the comments that you guys have left on YouTube in terms of the National Day of Prayer, you were spot on. It was a great service, but I can only show you certain clips. However, next National Day of Prayer, we promise we're going to go live for that one. But without further ado, Army Major, Reverend Dr. Shellarine Lang, how are you?
I am wonderful. How are you? It's good to be here on this show.
Good to see you. Great to see you. Big smile. I guess the military's got you traveling now.
Oh yeah. I'm enjoying it. Anything to help soldiers.
Yes, anything to help soldiers. So you are in California.
Yep, St. Louis Obispo.
You just missed that storm last night.
I did. It's amazing when you say yes to God where you might end up. So I do a chapel time every week, and I was saying at chapel time that God is with us no matter what. And I was saying when things happen for me, I say, God, fix it or move it. And I said it 4 times in chapel time, and every time it became more intense. And so right after chapel time, I got on the plane. Something happened with the plane. They need to fix it. They had us there for 30 minutes. They came and fixed it. Then it didn't work. We had to get off the plane. They delayed the plane, and then they just grounded the plane. So I say, God, that's amazing, because that storm came right through. I would have been flying right in it. So I am good. Good. I will get on the plane today.
Okay, so the three wise ones, what is that like? Because you are actually the only woman on the show.
I am the only female voice. It's an honor, right? It's an honor, and it's so I carry the weight of being an example for women, because when you see one woman, then you just say, okay, all women probably act like her. So I try to be very careful what I say, how I say it. And plus you got, the whole angry Black woman. And then you have the whole issue of dummying down so that I don't look more intelligent than the men, which I don't do.
No, you
And I'm not an angry Black female. And so just looking at the stigma and all the different things people can say, when you're authentically who you are, it's going to show. It's going to come out.
It has definitely showed and came out, and big responses from your being on the show. One in particular, the conversation was, let's talk about sex. The topic that stays in my mind, it says, when Dr. Lang gets another husband, she gonna kill him.
We have such good chemistry, and we can just continue to just have a good time in the show. We hit the topics that are serious, and then we keep it light when we can. We just have a good rapport with Rabbi, Imam. It's really nice. It's really good.
So now you're getting your second doctorates in counseling.
And traumatology.
Traumatology. If ever there was a time to need someone in that profession, in our country, we need it now.
We need it now. There's so much trauma we've already experienced, and then trauma that we are experiencing right now, compounded on top of what we already experienced. I mean, I think that's why you have so many mass shootings happening. People have trauma from childhood, and then trying to figure out, how do I reintegrate after being isolated for a year? When your mind starts going and there's nobody else to help you figure out those thoughts, it could go left real quick.
Okay, let's take it back to childhood. I mean, didn't everybody have such a perfect childhood, like the Beavers and,
No.
No, where,
So, I mean, you look at, but everybody's childhood is contextualized to them. So if you had an alcoholic parent, or, a lot of people, they've been affected by the drug culture. They've been affected by the gun culture. And then if you live in the urban city, you're trained to be hypervigilant because some bullet might come through. If you're in the rural environment, there's a lot of poverty, there's a lot of isolation. And so we think people are living this happy-go-lucky life because we watch TV, right? And everybody's going to Disney World. Everybody's going to school. Everybody's not going to school. COVID has really taken the covers off. It's people with no laptops, no internet, these kids are home probably with their abuser. It's a lot going on. It's going to be a lot to unpack once everybody comes back out.
So COVID was the only thing that actually stopped the mass shootings. I think during the pre-period of COVID, we had 2 incidents. In fact, leading up to the one in which I can't understand, Texas, with all the mass shootings going on, that they're about to pass an ease of gun carrying permits. Yet with all the mass shootings happening and all of the post-traumatic stress that people have going through with COVID, why?
I don't think people really think there's a post-traumatic stress from COVID. I think when we think of post-traumatic stress, we think of the military, we think about being in combat, we think about being sexually abused. We always go to the extreme. We don't look at the small things that can cause us to have post-traumatic stress. And so without clear guidance on how to do it, there are too many people having too many contextualized experiences for us to say this one blanket kind of a solution. And because there's no blanket solution, you got all kinds of things going on and people just trying to put out fires. And I think that's the problem. We're reactive instead of being proactive. And as you're trying to put out all these fires, all these other fires are starting, and now you're confused.
Well, let's look at the largest group that are victims of post-traumatic stress. They get the least amount of help. Children.
Children, you know why? Because for whatever reason, we think children will just bounce back. We think children, they'll get through it, they'll grow out of it, all this other stuff. But those very people who are committing these mass shootings were children. And I would imagine if you look back in their history, there may be something that never got addressed, right? So a healing that hasn't been addressed has no time frame for heal. You know what I mean? There's no way to know how to heal something if you never talk about it.
Something going. You mean like never getting that birthday party that they've always wanted? Didn't get that red fire truck, well, hey, they were good all year and Santa never brought that. Santa.
You know what? This country has been so acculturated to be me, and microwave, right? And so you have children who they have an expectation of getting whatever it is they ask for. And you have children who've never been told no, they've been overindulged, they have access to everything, pushing a button, everything comes. So when you have stuff like that, then you don't build a sense of resilience. There's no stick to itness. You don't have to wait for anything. So now you get to a point where as soon as something doesn't go your way, you throw a tantrum. And when you throw a tantrum, the response is you get what you want. But when you throw a tantrum, you don't get what you want, mental health sets in and you're like, I have no other skill set. I don't know what to do when somebody tells me no.
So let's look at overindulged children who are always getting their way. They grow up and in their world, they are a god. They can get whatever they want, whenever they want. They can do whatever they want to do, whenever they want to do it. And then reality sets in called adulthood, and they can't get their way. And then, they don't get that promotion. And the boss doesn't think that they're the demigod in which they have in their mindset. And they don't get their way. So they throw an adult tantrum called, I'm going to go to the nearest gun store, buy some semi-automatic handguns and get my way.
You got to look at the association between video games, desensitization, and then easy access to guns. So if you are overindulged, and let's say you have the latest video game, you're playing like Grand Theft Auto, and you're playing like Call of Duty, and you're just assimilated into a game where you feel like that's your gun, that's your power, then that's going to transfer into real life when things don't go your way. So you live in this fantasy of having control. And then when you get into the real world and you have no control, you're going to fall back on what your comfort zone was having that control. So I don't think there's a connect between reality and fantasy for some people. And then when they get arrested, what are you going to say? Because they weren't in their right mind, or were they? And how can you tell? How can you really tell that they were walking in current reality?
Well, for some Americans, the gun is their reality. Let's look at American, quote unquote, 1776. That was won by the gun. Let's go into the winning of the American West. It was done by the gun. We made heroes out of movie stars who can shoot fast, run hard. Everybody wanted to be John Wayne. A gun is in our Constitution that every American has the right to bear arms. And that even that reality has been bastardized to fit everybody's fantasy.
I think guns on some level is a phallic symbol. The bigger the gun, the bigger the ego, the bigger the man. Because guns didn't start with women. It didn't start with women.
No. See, I went through that 2 shows ago with 2 women on the show. There'll be no man bashing today, sister.
It's just current reality. Current reality is that there are phallic symbols that we overemphasize, and a gun is one. Your small gun, you're not going to walk around with no small gun. You want the biggest gun to make you look like the biggest, baddest dude. And so when you assimilate that into culture, then everybody's going to think that that's the way to go. A gun is a symbol of power and control. I would imagine you're not walking around in your head thinking I'm gonna shoot somebody, but I want to show you my gun so you know don't mess with me. So it's just an interesting dynamic that guns have been a theme throughout American history. But then you look at the media and you see that they overemphasize urban environments, shooting each other, killing each other. You don't see anything about other populations shooting each other and killing each other. So it's just a dynamic of how to control the narrative. How do the guns get into the inner city? Surely Pop, it doesn't have an arsenal in his backyard. That's not Pop. That's not JoJo on the block. That's somebody outside bringing those guns in. But we're not having that conversation. We're just having a conversation about all these young Black guys killing each other. But where are they getting these guns from? How are they getting access to a gun at 13? That makes no sense. And we say we want to police and we want to do the right thing. Well, somebody's not doing something, or somebody's just allowing things to happen, and somebody's making a lot of money. A lot of money is going through the hands of some folk all over the country.
Well, yes, let's look at who is giving them a lot of money right now. We have had gun control laws, which have repeatedly went to the House and the Senate and have failed miserably. Why? Because our politicians are not voting or making laws in the interest of the people to keep us safe. They are shooting down laws to keep to keep the interest of the gun manufacturers, who therefore pay a great deal of money to the NRA, who gives a great deal of money in terms of lobbyists to our politicians. So they sell us out. And the result of them selling us out is 232 mass shootings. And we're not even through May.
I would imagine that there are a lot more shootings that we don't even know about. I would imagine there's a lot going on. But that dollar, that mighty dollar, that supersedes humanity every single time. The Bible says the love of money is the root of all evil. It's not the money. It's the love of money that drives people to do things that are countercultural. But we live in a society where everything goes, right? Whoever writes the narrative, whoever controls the narrative, because we could write a narrative, but then somebody else controls it. Like Colin Kaepernick, he wrote a narrative of trying to do something for the Black men who were killed. So then the narrative got hijacked and it became about the flag, which was nothing to do with the original narrative. Guns are no different.
So, okay, let's see. Let me back that up. There are some people, whoever controls the narrative, it goes into the golden rule, Machiavelli. He who has the gold makes the rules. So he who has the money controls the narrative. And okay, so let's look at the love of money. Now, don't get me wrong. I know some people who do not love money, but they do consider it to be an important factor and force of their life. It's kind of the equivalent of breathing.
Yeah. And our society is very economics driven. So you have to have money to do what you do, just like credit. The whole credit industry is a racket. The way that things happen, you pay a bill, it takes points off. You don't pay a bill, it takes points off. You close an account. It's just a racket. It's just designed so the people at the top keep making the money and the people at the bottom keep scrambling, keep treading water. You know, the Bible says you'll always have the poor with you. Well, part of that is because they'll only be rich if you got somebody who's poor.
And the rich always have a way of oppressing the poor, giving them the insignia or the belief and dangling, okay, for those who have not matriculated, dangling the carrot in front of them is that if you keep doing this, you'll be rich.
Exactly. It's weird. It's just like the SBA, right? So let's look at what happened. When the Trump administration was in office, everybody was getting money left and right. Now that the Biden administration is in office, most of the people aren't getting any money. So I liken it to, let's say you're the gatekeeper and you want to let your friends in. So you're going to open the gate and you're not going to check tickets. You're going to let everybody in until all your friends kind of get through. When all your friends get through, then you're going to close the gate and you're going to start checking tickets. And then all the people who've gone through didn't matter about their ticket. But now you want to be so pigeonholed of the people who are left, and the people who are left probably the ones who need it the most. You know what I mean? It's really crazy.
Got deeper into that theory, especially the FBA. They opened up the gates, let everybody in, but they told their friends to get there first. So by the time they shut the gate,
Yes.
and started checking the tickets.
Yes.
Even people who have tickets, by the time they got through the gate, there was no more food left at the party. So
Even if so right now with SBA, there's plenty of food at the party. But what they're doing is they're looking at the tickets and saying, okay, your ticket says tomorrow, and your ticket doesn't have a blue letter, and your so they're being very specific about the ticket when everybody else who went through, they didn't even look at their ticket. So it's just not fair across the board.
yes.
And I understand they need to check, and they need, so maybe the previous administration, they were just letting people go. That's fine. But then you're punishing people who really need it based on now you want to check it. So it just looks bad. It looks bad. What it looks like right now is Trump administration gave us money. Biden's holding us hostage. That's what it looks like across the board.
That's what it looks like. But in reality, Trump administration gave money, but they gave it to all their friends first. But we're letting everybody in. But by the time everybody else got in or got to their banks, the money was already gone.
But you got to look at the narrative, right? Look at the narrative, because it doesn't matter what the logistics are. It doesn't matter what the reasons are. What you're looking at is people are suffering. They're terrified. And now you got one administration gave us money. One administration ain't giving us nothing. So it's not going to matter what the logistics are. It's not going to matter what none of that.
Okay. Now, we are going to dive more into why are we killing each other, and we're looking at a point in America where we're actually starting to see light of the tunnel. But we're going to discuss that when we come back from this break in 2 minutes, 2 seconds. I'm Vincent Squire, and I'm with Reverend Dr. Shellerine Lang. We'll be back.
Into small business. That's a great way to have generational wealth. If you're a minority business, you may be struggling to keep your head above water. Why? In 2019, the Black community spent $1.5 trillion because the Black dollar lifespan, 28 days Asian communities, 19 days Jewish communities, 6 hours a month in the Black communities. Major brands target the Black media, TV, and radio. That's why Blacks are brand shoppers. That's why they get a big slice of that $1 trillion pie. Your business needs exposure. You got quotes from cable networks and local radio. They charge a lot of money for a little exposure. Networking and social media is a full-time job to get part-time money. Let's look at a successful Black business model. Remember Soul Train? It was a new Black TV show that Johnson Cosmetics increased the exposure of Afro Sheen and made billions of dollars for Bobby Johnson. Where are you gonna find a good show for a low price? We have a talk show called What You Got to Say. What You Got to Say is a Black-owned talk show streaming live on YouTube channels, Facebook Live. What You Got to Say has a diverse audience from 18 to 62 years old, and their gross income range from $32,000 to $122,000 a year. That exposure will get you a good slice of the $1.5 trillion. Tell us about your business. Maybe able to get on our Black-owned spotlight. In 4 weeks, your business can go from surviving to thriving. To find out how you can get what's yours, email sales@squiresignage.com. They're waiting to hear what you got to say.
We're back, and I'm with Reverend Dr. Shellerine Lang. We're talking about, again, and what has gotten us this far. Now, let's address the elephant in the room, Dr. Lang. In America, in the world, in our homes, COVID has ripped the Band-Aid off a lot of things that we held near and dear. We have held on to the misconceptions and lies of our great society, how safe it is. And that big brother, the government, in which we've gotten these people and voted them into office who are looking out for our best interests, will always look out for our best interests. Yet COVID has been a period of awakening, and people now aren't liking the truth.
Mm.
So they're locked up. And the things that, and I'm going to, now, I may be a theology student. Dr. Lang has her doctorates in theology. I'm going to say that people are going through like a Jonah experience, sitting in the belly of the beast, completely isolated. None of those distractions, none of those lies, none of those influencers are pressing against their mind. But Jonah came to his senses and understanding what he did. Yet people now are faced with the truth, and they are doing what I see, one or the other. They're either trying to reestablish the big lie, and there's a lot to go into, or they are fighting it with violence, domestic violence. During a period of COVID has skyrocketed. I mean, people are beating up on everybody, women, men, children. Oh, here, another thing, alcohol is at an all-time high.
You know why? Because they'll close a grocery store, they'll close the mall, they'll close the bakery, they'll close the dry cleaner, but that liquor store has not closed. That liquor store has been stayed open. People have access to alcohol when they don't have toilet paper. You didn't see vodka flying off of shelves and they couldn't get any more. You didn't see people saying, "Oh, that's a rock, man. They out of it." Them standing in a long line for said no. They had all the liquor you wanted, all the wine you wanted. That's why it's called a spirit. So now you're like, I have no toilet paper, but I got my, you know what I mean? I got my wine. It's not communion. They was not having communion.
Okay. But another thing, on an all-time high, condoms.
Condoms at an all-time high?
Condom sales, they're at an all-time high.
Wow. Well, I guess what you gonna do when you're home? Well, at least they using them. Well, praise God.
No, Dr. Lang, I've been married for some time now, and I don't run into, and believe me, I know a lot of guys. I don't run into near married man that uses a condom.
Well, that's part of the joy of marriage. You don't have to, but I'm just saying the young people, you got all these kids at home, social distance. Maybe it's the young kids using them. I don't know, but there's a lot of COVID babies coming too.
Nope.
Well, who's buying them?
Married men.
Oh, because they cheating? Come on. That is crazy. That's crazy.
Yes.
Well, I guess you got easy. Well, I mean, I guess you got easier access now because, you don't have to creep around. Your wife home with the kids, you can do what you want. But women cheat too. So, so they got to get some condoms too. They cheat too. I don't want to just put it on the men. Women out there.
I appreciate it. But yes, so at all-time high. So this stress, people are trying to find an outlet, but not finding the right solution. So now as our society is starting to open up again, and they're starting to reemerge into a society where they were locked down, now this re-entry is causing, once again, those old problems. And who wants to go back to those old problems?
May is Mental Health Awareness Month, and I'm telling you, you have so many people. So when you have, let's say you're having suicidal ideation, right? And you're thinking about killing yourself. When you get in the presence of other people, then there's another voice that can kind of counter your voice. So if all you're hearing is you saying, you know what, I don't want to be here, I don't want to be here. When you get in the presence of other people and somebody says to you, do you want to kill yourself? It triggers another part of you to start to think maybe that's not a good idea. And you can kind of rationalize, and the other person can help you kind of come back to a different reality. But if you're the only one talking, and let's say, you're like, life is dumb, I can't do it anymore, and then you go shoot somebody, and then you just, with no sense of regard for anybody's life, if you're going to take your own life, then you're not going to have regard for other people's lives either. So you got so many people out here trying to manage their own intellectual understanding of life and managing their emotions around that by themselves. And there's no other voice to counter their negative voice.
Okay, so you're saying that crazy people are less crazy when they're around people?
I would say not everybody is crazy. I would say people with mental health challenges, when they're isolated and by themselves, there is no support system there to help them manage the voices that they're hearing. Like there was a lady who killed her kids, right? She said the devil told her that she had to kill her kids. So in her mind, because nobody was there to say anything to her, in her mind, she killed her 5 kids because in her mind, the devil was going to take them. So she had to kill them so they go to heaven. Now, had her husband or somebody been there and she said, the devil was talking to me, and somebody could have said to her, wait a minute, are you sure it's the devil? Let's think about it. Let's talk about it. So what I'm saying is, if you have mental health challenges, and let's say you're depressed, if you're isolated, there's no opportunity for help to come in to counter that thought. So you would still have that mental health challenge. It's just now you're in an environment where you can get the help you need.
Well, let me go old school. See, my mother didn't believe that the devil was going to take us because he did everything possible to beat the devil out of us.
That's old school mothering like that. You look like you okay though.
Bible, I'm gonna beat that out you. You okay. But yet, so the mental acuity right now, because of them being in their state of isolation. One of the things that I found in being in that state of isolation, looking at the Bible, is that every great person has went through that wilderness period of being isolated, being with them, their thoughts and understanding. But the difference between 1, reaching a level of greatness, or 2, becoming a mass killer is the simple fact of who you're listening to. When you are listening to your higher power, which is giving you in that period of isolation, is where he wants you to listen to every word clearly. What people and what that voice is saying to you should not include you buying a couple of guns and killing up everybody. You're not listening to the right person.
I don't know, because the way that God is presented now is problematic for some people. And so if you say that God is love, but then you treat me like I'm nobody, then those two things don't match. If you say that God is love and God loves me, yet everything is happening in my life that looks contrary to that, and then there's nobody to help me have balance in my life, I think part of the problem is the church has set people up for failure. Not totally. I'm saying in a specific place and where we haven't given people balance in their faith. We say, okay, ask God for it, God will give it to you. And then we don't talk about Shadrach, Meshach, and the bad Negro who had to go in the fire anyway. And they had to say, you know what, even if it does happen, we still not going to bow. That's the part we don't give people. When God says no, right? We teach people God's always going to say yes. God wants us to be prosperous. God wants us to be this and that and this. But when God says no, now what you going to do? Now you're going to be like, I'm good, and walk away.
Yeah, and I'm not big on, those prosperity pastors who say that, just lay your hand on it and you just claim it and then it's going to happen. No, okay? Because I'm mature enough in my spirituality to know that when God says no, it's an answer to what you were asking. But
believers die every day. Believers die every single day. There are a lot of believers who died of COVID, who say COVID ain't gonna get this. Pastors who preach that COVID was from the devil and that we have an anointing and that we're gonna be fine. And now where are they? They are gone. We misappropriate our faith the same way we misappropriate our funds. And if we don't teach that, then people are going to just be discombobulated.
Wow. So the church has a level of culpability in terms of setting people up for failure.
I think all faith traditions do. I mean, if you don't give balance to your people and if you don't put their feet to the fire, see, part of the challenge with the church is that we say that the pastor is not an idol, that the pastor is just a person, but the way that the culture of the church is structured, the pastor sits closest to God, if that makes sense. The same way that the Pope sits closest to God, and now they're saying, you know, we're Protestants and we don't believe what the Catholic Church has taught. But if you see remnants of it in every denomination, that the pastor is separate and apart from the people. The pastor is the access point to God. And if you don't teach people that they're their own access point, then they're always going to be dependent on a system.
But that's where we get the word pontificate. The Pope getting the word from God and delivering it to others as putting them on that pedestal or demagogical appearance or belief that this man, like the prophets, is from God's lips to his ear, and we do that, and yes, that is a misjustice to a lot of churches. Yet the other thing that we do sometimes is that we put our pastors on such high pedestals that we forget to see their humanity.
Exactly.
I have talked to a lot of pastors, and I found one thing, that the pastors are under the same satanic and demonic attacks that you go through as well.
And sometimes it's even worse, because when you sit in the seat of authority and you have, so the Bible says that as the pastor, those people are on your hands. So your ability to handle them, to hold them, to carry them, to shepherd them, there's an accountability that comes with that. So the attack sometimes is different. And so are you really preaching what you practice, or you practice what you're preaching? Because it's very different. And you think about when people kill themselves, there's this big conversation about, do they go to hell? Do they go to heaven? But you think about a person who is mentally challenged, right? And so they're thinking, if I kill myself, life will be better for them. I'm going to go be with God. And so you have various reasons why people do these mass shootings, because they're killing themselves. Like different cultures, that you become a martyr, right? So in a Middle Eastern country, when you kill yourself, man, you're doing the right thing. In America, we have a different concept of it, but the person going through the mental breakdown might have that concept. Like the guy who was trying to start a race war in South Carolina, going to the AME church. In his mind, he was doing a good thing. He was trying to set some stuff on fire. Now he's still alive. They probably, didn't beat him silly like they did other Black folk who didn't even do anything close to that. But it's a system.
Well, he didn't get killed because, he didn't have an air freshener in his car, but he did have a gun. But he did kill a lot of people.
Killed a lot of people.
Right. Let's look at the mental illness in terms of people wanting to start a race war. Let's see. My favorite of all, Charles Manson. The Skelter was framing Black people to do this heinous murder and putting the position of pointing the finger at them so that he can start a race war. Dylan Roof wanted to kill Black people so that Black people could arm themselves and rally and start a race war against white people. There are some people who said that one of the greatest things that we've experienced, this mass attack of white officers killing Black people, is because a lot of white officers are Klan members and they are killing Black people to start the race war.
That's interesting to me, that the villain has now become the victim. Right. And so how is it that the whole narrative has flipped, that white police officers are killing Black men who are the victims, but now the narrative is that the villain, the Black man, was causing the victim, who really is the villain, to feel like his life was in danger. So you just flip the script right in the moment, and that's the narrative you give.
Well, the narrative started in the mind of the officers because they look at us or how they see us or their lack of critical race theory, CRT. They already see us as the villain. We are lazy. We are shiftless. We're drug dealer, baby mama having killers who are a menace to society, and they're doing the world a great justice by killing us.
You know, it's interesting you say that. I'm actually studying critical race theory, and how does it impact not only the white people who are on the side of, we're using the same language, villain, victim, but how does it affect the side on the victim side? Because you have a lot of brown people who don't even realize that this is happening, right? Because let's say you're growing up in this current day and age, right? So what you're seeing is you're seeing a black president, you're seeing a black vice president, you're seeing black people moving and shaking, you're seeing Jay-Z, you're seeing Beyonce, you're seeing black people make it. But what you're not seeing is the systemic evil underneath the average person who's experiencing life. So if you have a skewed vision of the whole picture, then you're not even going to get into the fight in a way that changes the game. So you got black folks who's like, you know what, I'm good. I'm making money. I'm doing this. I'm doing that. So the sense of disunity among people who are on the side of the oppressed is always going to keep us oppressed.
So we're going to dive into a little bit of critical race theory, and we're going to understand one of the other concepts of why we're having so many mass shootings. I'm Vincent Squire, and I'm with Reverend Dr. Shellerine Lang. We'll be back. 2 minutes, 2 seconds.
To small business. That's a great way to have generational wealth. If you're a minority business, you may be struggling to keep your head above water. Why? In 2019, the Black community spent $1.5 trillion because the Black dollar lifespan, 28 days Asian communities, 19 days Jewish communities, 6 hours a month in the Black communities. Major brands target the Black media, TV, and radio. That's why Blacks are brand shoppers. That's why they get a big slice of that $1 trillion pie. Your business needs exposure. You got quotes from cable networks and local radio. They charge a lot of money for a little exposure. Networking and social media is a full-time job to get part-time money. Let's look at a successful Black business model. Remember Soul Train? It was a new Black TV show that Johnson Cosmetics increased the exposure of Afro Sheen and made billions of dollars for Bobby Johnson. Where are you going to find a good show for a low price? We have a talk show called What You Got to Say. What You Got to Say is a Black-owned talk show streaming live on YouTube channels, Facebook Live. What You Got to Say has a diverse audience from 18 to 62 years old, and their gross income range from $32,000 to $122,000 a year. That exposure will get you a good slice of the $1.5 trillion. Tell us about your business. May be able to get on our Black-owned spotlight. In 4 weeks, your business can go from surviving to thriving. To find out how you can get what's yours, email sales@squiresignage.com. They're waiting to hear what you got to say.
Okay, welcome back. If you think our show gets a lot of conversations, one day I'm going to show you clips of what we say during the break. All right, I'm here with Reverend Dr. Shellerine Lang. One of the big things that we find when in dealing with the profiling of people who are doing this mass shooting is one, the disenfranchisement with reality or their reality. Their life is not what they want it or believe that it should be. The understanding that, okay, a lot of them have this situation where, wait a minute, I am the master race. Why are these other people doing better than me? And the other is that, you know what? Like I'm the master race. I am all of that. I'm a demigod. I've been getting everything that I want in life, and I'm not getting everything. And I am going to now equalize it with an adult tantrum of filling up everybody. Has COVID exposed people to their insecurities to a painful level?
I would say yes. I would say that when you are on top and you're making your money and you know that you're on top, that's one thing. When COVID came and all the businesses were shut down, it put everybody on a level playing field. That might have been the first time in a long time that everything stopped. So that means nobody was making, I mean, the 1%, of course, was still making their money, but you got the mass people that now everybody's the same. So if I feel like I'm superior and now I'm just as broke as you are, then I got a problem and I got to figure out how to fix that.
Well, the last time that there was a level playing field where the country shut down and white America felt themselves to be or experience being a victim, I think of white America, was 9/11.
9/11. Well, I would say that 9/11 was a different, that was panic and that was fear. I wouldn't say it didn't shut down the same way. You still could make money. You still could run your business. When COVID came and everything had to stop, there's a sense of, I got one up on you. At least I know that I'm always going to be ahead of you. At least I know I'm always above you. That's kind of like if somebody says, I'm broke, but at least I'm not black. Right. And so now with COVID, you can't even say that because you don't have any money either. So it's like a disgust almost. It's almost like if the government has set it up so that white people can succeed, then they're disgusted if they can't succeed. So it's not about the black people. Like, let's go back to the SBA. It's not the black folk that they really care about. This white man went and sued the SBA because he felt like they're discriminating against white men. And how long did it take for that to be overturned? It took 2 days. 2 days, he won. How did he win in 2 days? Because the system is set up that white people have a leg up. And so now you're saying I'm on an even playing field with black people? No, that's never gonna fly.
Oh,
so it's not about the brown people, the Asian people, the Latinos. It's not about that with what's going on. What's going on is white people don't have access to money. So now you got to fix it.
Oh, well, hey, let's look at the other incident of being upset because white privilege was going away. January 6th.
Oh, now they're trying to say it was not an insurrection. I am just flabbergasted at how you could look at that situation and try to change the narrative. Like, I think about how can you go home and look your kids in the face? Like, really, how can you go home and actually have any type of integrity or anything? And you're saying people who died, there are people who died, like everybody saw it. So now you're trying to change the whole narrative. And there are people who are just jumping on the bandwagon saying, oh yeah, it wasn't that bad. What?
Yeah, the big lie. I remember the big lie in the 80s where they were talking about the Holocaust not being as tragic as it actually was. And some even saying that it didn't happen.
Listen, let me tell you, that Marjorie Greene lady, whatever her name is, right?
She's Taylor Greene.
So she's talking smack about a lot of stuff, right? About white people being the race or whatever. Now notice the shift, right? Everybody was in her corner till she said something about the Holocaust. So she could talk about black folk, Latino, she could talk about Asian, she could talk about anybody she wants to, but don't mess around with the Holocaust. Now that she talked about the Holocaust, trying to compare it to COVID and the mask and social distancing, now they want her out. What is that about? If you attack an ideology of whiteness, right? Then you'll be put out. But you can talk about us all day long. It don't even matter. It's okay. It's a systemic evil, and it's set up to keep us underneath somebody else's foot. Like he took his knee off his neck, but they still got their knee on our neck.
So now, as usual, all of these mass shootings go about. They now start to interview the neighbors of, the perpetrator, the spouse of the perpetrator, and they talk all about, how these people are now having, survivor grief. And they talk about how I could have done something to stop all of this. Yet, during the process of it happening, they didn't. And
silence is compliance. And so you got to look at the invested interests of white people. So you have all these white people trying to be anti-racist, and they're trying to have all these conversations about race and what does it mean to be Black and what does it mean to have privilege and all sort of stuff. But the system that's in place, they're getting the benefit of. So it's like a catch-22. If I say something about race, I'm impeding my own progress, right? Because if I open up the playing field to everybody, that means now I got to compete in an arena where I never had to compete before. I could get a B, right? So as a white woman, I can get a B in a class, and a Black person can get an A, and I'll still get chosen for the job. So we always had to work harder and still get less than. But now that you have to actually work for what you have to work for what you want, that's a game changer. Because I could just walk into a place and have access.
So zero-sum game.
It's going to be crazy, because as you think about people coming out of this whole COVID era, I mean, we gotta name it some kind of way. Like post-COVID is going to be a new word in the dictionary. Post-COVID, you got to look at now the playing field is just different, because if you don't have any money, you don't have any money.
Dr. Lane, hold on. America, you heard that word here first.
Right. So if now businesses are closing and having to reopen, look at what happened with the restaurant. They tried to give out the funds for the restaurant. That thing crashed in 2 days. Like, it's a lot of people who need the help. And then how do you differentiate who's going to be successful? Because old money goes a long way. And so we get to decide, like Mar-a-Lago, they didn't suffer during COVID.
Well, here's the problem that I have with old money. A lot of that old money still has Confederate flags on it.
A lot of it, or all of it? All of it. Because you got a lot of folk who didn't get 40 acres and a mule. You got a lot of folks who got nothing. And so now you're talking about reparations. Reparations is going to be hard to classify and clarify, because there's just a lot going on. Master was having kids with the slave. I mean, so who gets what now? I don't know if there's any Black folk in America who don't have white people in their families.
Yeah, well, if they actually pass the reparations bill and they start giving out the estimated $780,000 per household, there are going to be a whole lot of white people claiming to be Black. So
you're like, because Grandpa said, it's just crazy. And then how they gonna differentiate who gets reparations and who doesn't? Is it going to go based on lineage? Is everybody going to have to go to ancestry.com and then prove what's going on? Like, how are they really going to prove who gets what?
Okay, so the people who are experiencing this guilt of what they should have done, what I find out is that, everybody looks at, oh, by the way, when they start interviewing neighbors, you know what they always find? Somebody says, well, I can't understand he did all that. He was such a quiet boy.
He was such a nice guy.
Yeah. Well, my mother had 100% assurance that I would not grow up to be a mass killer, because growing up, no one would say that I was such a quiet child. Okay.
Wow. It's interesting that people who survive and the people who know the people who kill people now want to say, I should have said something. You got to look at the subtle nature of racism, the microaggressions. Like, it becomes a part of the fabric of life. So I came to the hotel because my flight was grounded, right? So I came to the hotel. And so the guy was like, this is your room, such and such, such and such. He was like, Mia, so let me tell you about the restaurants. He was like, this restaurant up the street, that the fried chicken is the best. And I'm thinking, you telling me about fried chicken because I'm brown? Because clearly if I wasn't brown, you'd be telling me about the sushi at the other restaurant. So it's just embedded in the fabric of how they see us. And so they can insult us and it'd be nothing because for them it's normal. And so that's what you got. So now you're saying, oh, he was such a nice guy, according to your reality of what's a nice guy. Because he could have been talking about black folks from the days long, but in a culture of white people where that's okay, it's not outside of the norm.
Well, yeah, it's part of the actual language. In fact, a lot of they have lived in such a racist society that they do not understand that what they're saying is racist, or or basically, as they said in the diary of a Nazi spy, you tell a lie long enough, it becomes the truth.
It becomes the truth. Like this whole issue of unconscious bias, right? So you got these mass shooters who are out here shooting people. And back in it, well, for the most part, it was young white men shooting up places. You didn't see a lot of brown people doing it. I have yet to see a woman go be a mass shooter. I've yet to see that. Maybe it happened. I just didn't see it. That she might kill her kids because Satan is talking to her. But I don't see historically it's young white men who do that. So this whole unconscious bias of they didn't know that that's what they were doing. Like the guy who killed all the Asian ladies. Oh, it was an unconscious bias. He just happened to shoot all Asian women. Unconsciously, he was biased. That's not unconscious.
He just happened to drive past all of those white establishments and went to an Asian establishment and shot up people. Yes, but that was unconscious. You know, see, when I did counseling, you don't understand the power of premeditation. You know, the power of premeditation, because like when I did counseling, you know, one of the biggest things that take premeditation and a breakdown of the marriage is infidelity. And you know, and they were like, well, it just happened. No, it doesn't. No, that takes planning, because nobody clothes just fall off.
And you got to set up the lie. You got to set up the lie on both sides. You got to set up your spouse you lying to, and then you got to set up the one you want to cheat with.
Exactly. The same thing with this bullcrap about unconscious bias. No, that's premeditation. That took planning. You had to get the guns, get the bullets, find the target, get to the target, and then take care of it. No. It was not just a random, well, I just happened to go after all, I just happened to be shooting and all Asian people were there. Oh, crap.
So here's the question though. How did the seed of discord get sown in that young man? What did he hear? Who said it? All this China virus, all of this stuff about Asians, all of those has been sowing seeds in his life, and he has just been soaking it in. So he didn't create himself. He was created by a system of lies.
Oh no,
so we don't hold the system accountable for what they're creating.
Let's take that a little deeper, Dr. Lang. First of all, this man is broke. Second of all, he ain't not getting that much aid. Third, he's facing the insecurity of losing his home, utilities being shut off. And fourth, he's not seeing any end in sight. But yet the person solely responsible is being Adolf Hitler and telling them the big lie that this is the fault of Chinese people and we need to go up against them. So yeah, he was set up.
It's insane. It is absolutely insane.
But we're going to go and dive into another subject. I'm Vincent Squire with Reverend Dr. Shellerine Lang, and we're talking about, yet again, another mass shooting. We'll be back. Oh, by the way, don't be shy. I know you guys see that number flashing in. Join in the conversation. 2 minutes, 2 seconds.
To small business. That's a great way to have generational wealth. If you're a minority business, you may be struggling to keep your head above water. Why? In 2019, the Black community spent $1.5 trillion because the Black dollar lifespan, 28 days Asian communities, 19 days Jewish communities, 6 hours a month in the Black communities. Major brands target the Black media, TV, and radio. That's why Blacks are brand shoppers. That's why they get a big slice of that $1 trillion pie. Your business needs exposure. You got quotes from cable networks and local radio. They charge a lot of money for a little exposure. Networking and social media is a full-time job to get part-time money. Let's look at a successful Black business model. Remember Soul Train? It was a new Black TV show that Johnson Cosmetics increased the exposure of Afro Sheen and made billions of dollars for Bobby Johnson. Where are you going to find a good show for a low price? We have a talk show called What You Got to Say. What You Got to Say is a Black-owned talk show streaming live on YouTube channels, Facebook Live. What You Got to Say has a diverse audience from 18 to 62 years old, and their gross income range from $32,000 to $122,000 a year. That exposure will get you a good slice of the $1.5 trillion. Tell us about your business. Maybe able to get on our Black-owned spotlight. In 4 weeks, your business can go from surviving to thriving. To find out how you can get what's yours, email sales@squiresignage.com. They're waiting to hear what you got to say.
I didn't say this earlier, but going out to the victims and the survivors of the, yet again, latest mass shootings. Dr. Lang, PTS is what a lot of people are experiencing. It's a huge cause of some of the mass shootings, some of the violence that we're experiencing, some of the indifferences, and some of the outbreaks, especially, and it's coming out in a lot of racial, it's coming out in a lot of sexual, it's coming out in a lot of forms. What are some of the signs that we need to look for in terms of this post-traumatic stress?
There's quite a few signs. The challenge is that with people being isolated, if they don't feel like anybody's listening to them, they're not going to tell you. And so when you're around a person, you can notice maybe they keep to themselves. They don't act the same way they used to. They're hyper vigilant. They're not sleeping. But you'd have to have a conversation with them to know that. And so with everybody being socially distanced, who are they really talking to? And so if they're talking to themselves and they're having this conversation with themselves, and they could be telling themselves that they're doing okay. But as people come out, you begin to see their behavior, but then everybody has a baseline. And so now everybody's baseline is going to be different because there's nobody there to see it. So you don't know what your coworker's baseline is because you haven't seen them. And so now what looks like could be normal is abnormal for them, but then maybe they were a happy-go-lucky person, but now that they've been home for the last 12 months, maybe their personality is different, but you don't know that because you haven't seen them. So it's going to be hard to tell who has PTSD and who doesn't unless they say, you know what, I think I might have PTSD.
Yeah, well, yeah, that's like people admitting that they're crazy.
Yeah, a lot of people aren't going to say that. No. And then you have people of faith who associate admitting you have something with lack of faith. Like if I say I got diabetes, if I say I got a broken leg, if I say I got mental health, that means I'm denying the power of God. And so first we need to fix that you could be a believer and take the medicine. Like if you're having a heart attack, you're not gonna be like, oh Lord, stop this heart attack. Somebody gonna call 911, but it's only in the extreme things that we give people space to go to the doctor. When it comes to mental health, when it comes to PTSD, depression, diabetes, what do you hear people of faith say? I'm not claiming that. I'm not claiming that.
I don't need to talk to no psychiatrist. All I need is Black Jesus and
And that's where we are today. We are today that you have communities of faith saying, you know what, we really need to address the mental health challenge. Because, they go back to, in the Bible, the guy came and he was on the island by himself. He was talking to himself and he had a demon, and Jesus called the demon out, and then he was okay.
Yeah. Okay. So addressing the actual issue. So if you're living with someone and they're starting to experience hypervigilance, what is hypervigilance?
So hypervigilance is you're always on alert. You're always on guard. So innately in us, we have a fight or a flight.
If you're not hypervigilant, you're going to die.
Okay, so therein lies part of the challenge, because if you're fight or flight, which is our ability to manage our emotions, right? Our ability to manage our ability to stay in fight or to run. If that switch is always on, then you're going to be desensitized to when the switch needs to be off. And so if you're always hypervigilant, then when you're not supposed to be hypervigilant, you won't even know because you're always on. That's like being an actor and you're always acting. At some point, your current reality and your acting reality are going to collide, and you're not going to know the difference. It's just going to be all one thing. So for a person who is not normally hypervigilant, they would be always checking the lights. They'd be always checking to see somebody's coming. They would think somebody might be trying to kill them. You got to think about, in an extreme sense, it would be a soldier who's always hearing that gunfire. They're always hearing the explosion. They're dreaming about it. They're seeing it.
But in the hood, we call that paranoid.
In the hood, now in the hood, with all these kids getting killed by like stray bullets and people, you call it being safe. You don't call it being paranoid. You call it being safe. When you can't go outside, you never know when somebody's going to start shooting. As a hospice chaplain, one time I went to see a patient. It was like 9:00 in the morning. And I saw these two guys running up the street, shooting each other. Broad daylight, guns drawn, just shooting each other. Sometimes it's just being safe. But every context has a context, right? And so for a person who is now PTSD due to COVID, it would be that social isolation. It would be not being able to contact with people. As people, we're created for connection. So when you take that connection away, it starts to eat away at your intellectual ability to manage life. It starts to eat away at your emotional responses to things, because there's nobody to bounce anything off of. You're just sitting in there by yourself, or you got the computer all day. So now what do you have? You got computer for work. You probably, if you're single, man, female, whatever, you got all this porn going on. You got all these video games going on. You got all these conspiracy theories going on. So now there's nobody to counter any of that stuff. So now they say everything's back open. And now you're coming back into society that doesn't look like the society that you had for the last 12 months. So now what do you do?
Doesn't feel like the society that we had, because
exactly.
People are racially sensitive and their antennas are up. We're looking at the police sideways a lot more. We are now questioning, because when it was AIDS or the flu or the last epidemics and pandemics that hit our country, there was one distinguishing characteristic that gave us alert. With COVID, you don't know.
You don't know. And now you got some people who believe COVID is real. Some people believe COVID was never real. So now you can wear a mask, don't wear a mask. I do appreciate that federally, there's one mandate that you still have to wear it on planes, trains, those kind of things. And DOD built, all that kind of stuff. But if you have somebody who hasn't been vaccinated, you're not going to know, because they're not going to make you say it. They're not going to make you say, let me see your papers. Now, some people might.
Oh, yeah.
Just like with fake IDs, right? Just like with fake IDs, I'm quite sure somebody figured out how to get a fake COVID test result.
Yeah, no. There was a guy that just got arrested about a month ago for producing fake cards that he was selling for $20.
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah. Yes.
And it's crazy because health is relative, right? And so people can decide what they want to do. The beauty of America is choice. The curse of America is choice.
Yes. So let's look at, hypervigilance. After experiencing or finding out that they're going through the point of hypervigilance, how do you establish their baseline?
Well, it's going to be hard to establish. Well, post COVID, it's going
Yeah.
to be hard to establish a baseline because you can see a baseline when you interact with a person. So let's say you're in an office with a person and they're always happy, they're always the life of the party, they're always kind and talking, but now they're to themselves. They're not talking. They're not making eye contact. They're falling asleep at their desk. So their baseline would be that they've always been this happy person. But let's suppose people come back now to the office and it's post COVID, it's a year later, office is back open. You don't know what their baseline was at home. You don't know whether or not they just had the computer on and they were asleep. Because let's say your computer didn't have a camera and you didn't have to turn the camera on. All you know is that the computer is on. They never interject during the meeting. So you don't know if they're sleeping, they're eating, they're contemplating suicide. You don't even know if they're drinking, taking drugs. You don't know. It's going to be very hard to tell. Very hard.
Okay. So is hypervigilance the only actual sign that you would see of PTS?
No, you would see like if they're having nightmares. Sometimes people can't sleep at all. Sometimes people are sleeping way too much, eating. So it affects your body in a way.
I'm going to tell you, I ate a lot of COVID-19.
A lot of people ate during COVID-19.
Yeah, tell you, a lot of it was over that 19 pounds too.
Now, some people are just eating because when you're home, you just snack and you see food. But some people use food as an emotional comfort. Yeah, so it's emotional support. So when it comes to PTSD, there are some signs of but the extreme signs would be hypervigilance, nightmares. Even during the day, you have these intrusive thoughts and you just see what it is. It's going to be hard because when it comes to combat, when it comes to sexual assault, there's a target. There's like a common theme that runs through that. But with COVID, it's going to be a little different because everybody's life is different. And so your PTSD might be, now I'm isolated, I can't be around people. So your sense of what your baseline is or what your triggers are is going to be different.
All right. So how do we, if we see someone showing some of these signs, how do we help them?
Well,
I'm going to tell you right now, somebody's at the point of just becoming a mass, murderer. I'm going to think twice about, approaching.
You are. So you're going to have to be careful because if you don't have rapport with a person, then they're not going to trust you. And part of the challenge is when you're isolated, you begin to wonder who you can trust and who you can't trust. So if you already had trust issues pre-COVID, you're going to have trust issues post-COVID. And so if you don't already have a relationship with them, then it's going to be kind of hard to intervene. What you can do is just kind of ask some pointed questions like, how are you sleeping? How are you eating?
People.
Well, part of suicidal ideation is being direct and asking the question, are you thinking about killing yourself? Are you thinking about killing somebody else? But then you have to go beyond that and say, do you have a plan?
Do you
think about it?
You just purchased the gun? Oh, okay, great. Look, really? Right. You do that. So direct actually works.
Right, being direct. Now you got to consider if a person already has a plan, a person already set the plan in motion, you might become the collateral damage. So you gotta use some discernment with that because if they're going to go shoot up something and then you step in, you might get shot in the process.
Oh, okay. So yeah, be tactful in that aspect. But let's look at the last mass shooter. He had a plan.
He had a plan.
Yes. In fact, his plan, he had the distraction where he set his house on fire with a timer and a bomb. And then while that was going off, he decided to go up and kill up people in his office. The fact that it was the office and not the family or neighborhoods, does that give any indication to his insecurity?
I would say that probably he was playing out in his head something that may have been a false idea. So like I said, when you have these voices talking to you in isolation, You have nobody to combat that thought. So maybe in his mind, he was thinking they hate me. I'm going to kill them because they destroyed my life. I don't have any money, so you're ruminating all of these ideas in your head. And so his level of security with his own thought was what drove him to do that. I don't think it was his insecurity. I think it was security in believing his own truth that made him do that.
Okay, so his belief in his lie made him target his point of work.
Exactly. So you got to think about the insurrection, right? It wasn't insecurity that made them go take the White House. It was their security. So it wasn't insecurity that they weren't going to get what they wanted. It was their security knowing that they had a person in charge who was backing them going to take the White House.
Wow.
Now, it was the Capitol, but what they wanted was the White House. The Capitol was just the vehicle through which to get the White House back.
Right. So we've got secure that we're going to bring the 45, or as I call them, the Post of 45, thought that if they can take the Capitol, they can put 45 back in power, and he would therefore bless their insurrection.
Now you got to look at, that has to be some serious sense of security. You have to have a sense of privilege and entitlement that you can walk into a place and get access to a place and not think it's wrong.
Okay. Yes. And we're going to dive into, by the way, at the end of the show, we're going to post up some information. So if you're around someone, or even if you yourself have had feelings of depression, anxiety, wondering about what you are going to do next, or even as Dr. Lang said, even if you have a plan of causing harm to yourself and others, we're going to put up a number where you can talk to someone first, or if someone in your family, in your household, in earshot of you or near you looks like they're having a plan and showing any of these signs that we discussed earlier, we'd like you to give some people a call. Trust me and believe me, inaction is the worst thing that you can do. Taking action, the life that you save may be that of someone you love. It may be that of your own. I'm Vincent Squire with Dr. Shellerang Lang. We'll be right back, and we're going to dive into critical race theory, especially after talking about these people who thought that they could take over the Capitol. We'll be back. 2 minutes, 2 seconds.
To small business. That's a great way to have generational wealth. If you're a minority business, you may be struggling to keep your head above water. Why? In 2019, the Black community spent $1.5 trillion because the Black dollar lifespan, 28 days Asian communities, 19 days Jewish communities, 6 hours a month in the Black communities. Major brands target the Black media, TV, and radio. That's why Blacks are brand shoppers. That's why they get a big slice of that $1 trillion pie. Your business needs exposure. You got quotes from cable networks and local radio. They charge a lot of money for a little exposure. Networking and social media is a full-time job to get part-time money. Let's look at a successful Black business model. Remember Soul Train? It was a new Black TV show that Johnson Cosmetics increased the exposure of Afro Sheen and made billions of dollars for Bobby Johnson. Where are you going to find a good show for a low price? We have a talk show called What You Got to Say. What You Got to Say is a Black-owned talk show streaming live on YouTube channels, Facebook Live. What You Got to Say has a diverse audience from 18 to 62 years old, and their gross income range from $32,000 to $122,000 a year. That exposure will get you a good slice of the $1.5 trillion. Tell us about your business. May be able to get on our Black-owned spotlight. In 4 weeks, your business can go from surviving to thriving. To find out how you can get what's yours, email sales@squiresignage.com. They're waiting to hear what you got to say.
All right, welcome back. Critical race theory, the actual study and understanding that race has a direct part and impact in another person's gain, loss, how they are seen, how they are viewed, and how that view affects them negatively. Our country now is at a point where the big fight is bringing critical race theory into our schools. Uh, Dr. Lang, why do white suburban schools have an issue about their children learning and understanding critical race theories?
Well, if you insert critical race theory, you will dismantle the foundation of this country. You will cause it to collapse because it's based on one up. It's based on a hierarchy. And so if you say everything I've done, so it's really, I don't want to admit that I come from an evil background because that's what this country is based on. It's evil. It's evil to own people. It's evil to rape people. It's evil to say I'm better than you just because of the color of my skin. It's evil to set up a whole system based on me being better than you. Not only, I mean, you got to look at the anger, the rage. It's not even the anger. Look at the rage in the faces of the white people who didn't want Black people to sit in the same restaurant, didn't want Black people to go to the same schools. It's not just anger. It's disgust. It is like embedded hatred against us. And so if you put that in school, then what is that going to say about the beauty of America, the American dream? So the American dream was set up for white people. It was not set up for Black people. So if you teach that to children, then you cannot continue the lie of Black people are this and brown people are this and Latinos are this and Asians are this, because now it puts the truth on the table. And so it dismantles everything you've already established. And who realistically is going to say, I'm a liar? I'm a liar and I really need to repent. How can you look in the face of God? How can you look in the face of people who are supposed to have faith and say, I owned people and that was okay?
Well, I think that America is at the point of my daughter, after a long, incredible argument with my wife, we had to, and she didn't want to do it. She could not get herself to sit our child down and tell her the truth. So I had to do it, in which she didn't even want to be in the room, could not face the truth. I sat my daughter down and explained to her, there is no Santa Claus.
How old was she?
3.
Why would you tell her that at 3?
Hey, now you sound just like my wife.
See, here's why I say that. Okay, go ahead, finish your point.
Here is the point. At some point in time, we cannot continue the lie. Just like America cannot continue the lie. At some point in time, you got to rip the scab off of that bad boy and let the healing begin. Even see, listen,
Santa Claus is no different than Spider-Man, Marvel, Star Trek, all of those things. It's a fantasy. And it gives people joy for a certain time in their life. So I'm not opposed to the theory of Santa Claus. I mean, Santa Claus is not the reason for Christmas, no. But it's no different than Wakanda. It's no different than having something amazing to believe in. Now, when it comes to dismantling the lie of this country, you'd have to readjust everything. If you taught this new generation, now let's think about it, right? If you taught this new generation the truth about this country, that means the future will look very different. That means old money is going to be dispersed. That means old land is going to be dispersed. That means that people who have been on the side of oppression now need to be given reparations. So what does that mean? That means like a whole bunch of white people are going to lose their stuff. Now what are they going to do? See, we know how to survive. We know how to make it work. They don't know how to make it work.
But it doesn't truly have to mean that. It doesn't mean that, in terms of talking with a lot of Black people and reparations and using critical race theory, it does not mean that we're going to go and start now demanding that you give us half of everything that you have
made. This country
made.
is built on economics.
This country was built on economics, but in terms of critical race theory, it does mean that, you know what, you can understand why I'm upset that there's a knee on my neck.
So what is the point of knowing why if you're not going to do anything about it? Faith without works is dead. If I'm bringing critical race theory, that means I want to see some changes. I want to see some equality in houses. I want to see some equality in jobs. Women still don't get paid the same amount as men. I have all these degrees. There are still men who make more than me just because they're men, even though I'm overqualified for a lot of things. Well, if you're going to do critical race theory, that means there's something needs to come with that.
Hold on, Dr. Wayne, on that point, when I was in corporate world, even though I have all the degrees, experience, education, and all of those other people would come to me for advice, direction on these projects, I was still underpaid than all the white guys.
Exactly. So you're telling me with critical race theory, you would just say, I just want you to understand that. No, I want you to understand it, and I want you to fix it.
That's not what I'm saying, Dr. Lane. What I'm saying with critical race theory, I want you to understand why I'm upset. And now the next thing I want you to do is to not upset me again. I want you to look at what you're doing, how you've gotten this way, and what gives you white privilege so that you can now understand the truth. And now we're leveling the playing field. Now that we got the quote unquote, God bless me, and I'm white and I'm superior because God bless me, which they've actually told the slave owners, or God blessed us to be the superior master race, which Adolf Hitler told them to exterminate 6 million Jews. No. Let's now get to the truth of it. Let's level this playing field and let's build back better.
You can't build back better until you come up off the money.
Okay. All right. I'm not saying no to the money.
You have to come up off the wealth, right? Because the Bible says that to make generational wealth for your children and children's children. As brown people who are oppressed on the side of oppression, if we have no foundation of wealth and we don't have access to the principles that would give us a foundation of wealth, then we're just talking. Critical race theory is just talking if there's no action, if there's no release of funds so that we now have access to all the wealth. We have access to the land. We have access to the capital. We have access to all the things that they have access to. That's why they're scared, because they know that when you tell the truth, you got to come up off of the stuff that you've been holding hostage from us.
Okay, and that's one of the things that I was talking about. I think that a lot of Black people will do well if they just level that playing field and give them access.
Access to what though, right?
Yes.
The other problem is, right? So these people, okay, so you have people who don't know, who are not financially sound, who are not financially educated. So they don't know about stocks. They don't know about investing. They don't know about savings. They don't know about simple things like the amortization schedule, right? So if you're paying 23% on your loan, if you use the amortization schedule and pay against the principal, then you'll pay less for your car. You don't know that. You don't know about investment. You don't know about 401ks. If they release $790,000 to people, they're going to be at Walmart. They got $4,000 from a stimulus check and go bought a TV. How many of them invested in their future? How many of them got some stocks? But if you keep people ignorant, you could give them stuff and it's always going to come back to you. Walmart's still going to get rich. They still going to go buy Lamborghinis. Lamborghini's still going, they're going to buy Gucci. Oh, not everybody, but you got to look at the blanket amount of people who are not sound with finances. And where could that start? In communities of faith. Instead of just asking them in the time, why don't you teach them about savings? Why don't you teach them about stocks? Why don't you teach them about 401ks and retirement? Don't hold them hostage now so that you can get your money and then you set them up for failure later.
Well, let's see. Well, one of the big things with some communities of faith is the simple fact that a lot of them are not that inept in finance themselves. The other thing is that a lot of pastors at this point in time are just plain old burnt out.
I get it. Because how you have a building fund for 20 years? When is somebody going to teach them about an amortization schedule and pay against the principal? Well, okay, you're going to have this chicken, you're going to do, okay, so this is an amortization schedule service. All of this money is going against the principal. Why don't we do that? But we like to hold people hostage and take them on this journey of foolishness and then say, we just got to believe God. That doesn't even make any sense. Teach me how to get up out of stuff.
Teach me how to use the tools that God has already prepared before us.
But those tools have been held hostage. So I was looking at, Fairfax County in Virginia, they're like, no, we don't want to do critical race theory, right? So it's a white man who's heading this thing up. He's saying he doesn't want it in the school. He doesn't want them to be the guinea pigs. Fairfax County is very affluent. And so if you put critical race theory in school and you teach a whole generation of children that race is an issue and they do something to change it, then by the time you get to the next level of governors, of senators, of think about who we're going to put in the White House. Think about who we're going to put in the Supreme Court. That changes the trajectory of the country. That changes the foundation. They don't want that because that means it's going to be some white people going to be broke.
Who we're going to elect as our next district attorney general, and who's going to be our next police sheriff. So
exactly.
yeah, definitely.
Exactly. It's a game changer. Think about who's going to be the next police chief. Right. Let's think about all the. So all cops aren't bad, but you got some of them who they drank the juice and they see us as villains. But if you put a black person as a police chief, you say, okay, mess around. And now you got this whole qualified immunity that's being taken away. That's a game changer. Now you don't have qualified immunity. So if you kill a black man for no good reason, if you try and tase a young man and you wind up exchanging your taser for a gun, now you're going to be held accountable. All of that comes from critical race theory to say there's a bias. So as long as I pretend there's no bias, I can still do what I want. And I can live my life the way I've always. So people say all the time, you used to be able to tell a joke. You were still hurting people with your joke. But because your microaggression, you thought it was okay. So he's like, oh, just get over it. It was just a joke. It was not a joke. I don't think it's funny. Now I have the platform to say that's not funny. And don't say that again.
Okay. There you go. And that's what everyone or what people are fighting against. They're fighting against the truth. They're fighting against the change that they've been seeing for a long time. Right now, they're standing up there looking like the dinosaurs watching the comet coming to them. And they are fighting against that. They're pushing back against that. What do you mean I have to now go and teach my child that this black kid is just as good as he is?
Exactly. Let's look even at football, right? So for years, I've been calling the Washington, which is now the Washington football team. I would never call them by name. I would call them the racial slurs, the Washington racial slurs. I've been calling them that for years. And look at how the owner of the Washington racial slurs refused to change the name because he was making money and he didn't think it was wrong. He didn't think it was wrong. All the board members didn't think it was wrong. There was probably somebody that said, why are you calling them this name as a racial slur? But it didn't compute until after George Floyd, and now the whole country erupted, and now everybody trying to be woke. Now he changed it. Why did it have to go to that extreme to change it?
He still didn't change that after George Floyd, okay? Because his mindset was this. Wait a minute. I got the money. So the only opinion that matters is mine.
Exactly.
Well, the people who give him money said, our opinion matters more than yours.
Exactly. And it wasn't until people started to come to the knowledge of the truth, right? The truth has been in our face this whole time, but the culture says we can do what we want because we're the 1%. Why are there no black owners of NFL? Why?
Because they don't have the money.
Oh, they got the money.
Yeah.
They got the money. They just don't have the access.
Because they won't give them access. And they've also restricted the fact of more franchises and more teams. They've also restricted the fact of who they have on the board. We are talking about, and I talked to a guy who used to work for the Secret Service and is now a auto salesman. Can you believe it? Yet He talks about the simple fact of being a auto salesman in a high-end luxury dealership. He talks about the simple fact of his connections and understanding. He has a lot of athletes, a lot of celebrities who do not mind coming in and breaking a couple $100,000 off cash for these cars. Yet he has been the top salesman 3 years in a row. And critical race theory, although he's making money for Master, Master still has not made him manager or give him the keys.
Oh yeah, they will use us. They will use us to do the work, but won't give us the credibility or the authority. And that's where it lies, in the authority to make decisions. If you're saying this needs to happen, but you're not at the table making the decisions, then you're just talking. Critical race theory means nothing if you're not at the seat of authority and you're not making changes.
Oh, no. See, in my situation in corporate world is that you weren't at the seat of authority, yet authority came to you and asked you the suggestions and then took it to the board and oh, wow, you are absolutely brilliant. Oh.
Right. Exactly. And that has been the challenge for years, that we come up with stuff and they take it.
In fact, in reading Obama's book, his father should have been president because his father was the one that trained everyone who became president. And then his father said, wait a minute, look, why am I going to train another person to take the job that I should have?
Exactly.
We're diving into critical race theory, and we're going to finish this up in 2 minutes, 2 seconds. I'm Vincent Squire with Dr. Shellerine Lang. Bye-bye. See you soon. 2 minutes.
To small business. That's a great way to have generational wealth. If you're a minority business, you may be struggling to keep your head above water. Why? In 2019, the Black community spent $1.5 trillion because the Black dollar lifespan, 28 days Asian communities, 19 days Jewish communities, 6 hours a month in the Black communities. Major brands target the Black media, TV, and radio. That's why Blacks are brand shoppers. That's why they get a big slice of that $1 trillion pie. Your business needs exposure. You got quotes from cable networks and local radio. They charge a lot of money for a little exposure. Networking and social media is a full-time job to get part-time money. Let's look at a successful Black business model. Remember Soul Train? It was a new Black TV show that Johnson Cosmetics increased the exposure of Afro Sheen and made billions of dollars for Bobby Johnson. Where are you gonna find a good show for a low price? We have a talk show called What You Got to Say. What You Got to Say is a Black-owned talk show streaming live on YouTube channels, Facebook Live. What You Got to Say has a diverse audience from 18 to 62 years old, and their gross income range from $32,000 to $122,000 a year. That exposure will get you a good slice of the $1.5 trillion. Tell us about your business. Maybe able to get on our Black-owned spotlight. In 4 weeks, your business can go from surviving to thriving. To find out how you can get what's yours, email sales@squiresignage.com. They're waiting to hear what you got to say.
Okay, so if you were watching earlier, you know that Reverend Dr. Shellerine Lang is a little passionate about critical race theory. So I'm going to change the subject. Now, leader Kevin McCarthy actually got caught in a lie. John, can you roll that clip for us?
So yesterday, the resolution that you brought to the floor about masks
I'm sorry, I should have gave John a
was
heads up
tabled.
during
Is
the
there
break,
anything
but
else that your conference can do or plans to do to change the mask requirements currently on the floor?
Well, we would just like to abide by the science. What's interesting is you look at this building, there's a chamber for the House and a chamber for the Senate. But apparently, COVID works differently in both chambers. Because in the Senate, you don't wear a mask. In the House, you have to wear a mask. The only difference is the speaker. She doesn't want to abide by the CDC rules. She actually wants to have greater control. That, to me, is a real frustration on all that we have happen. How can the Senate not wear a mask and then the House in the same building? To me, it's all about it. That's not true.
Are you encouraging the rest?
You said 75%. Half your conference is.
That's what happens when you try to make stuff up. That's what happens. That's what happens when you try to pontificate and what you don't really know.
Oh, coming from God's lips to his ear, huh? You'd think that God would be smart enough to give him the accurate numbers, right?
Well, that's what I mean. He's got to look at the fact that he is the scapegoat. They have thrown him to the wolves. His people have thrown him to the wolves, and he doesn't even know it. He's the sacrificial lamb right now, and he doesn't even realize it.
No. Well, to a lot of people, to some, he may be the sacrificial lamb. To some, he's the big idiot because he had the opportunity to change the brand of the Republican Party, to get the Republican Party to look into a level of truth and understanding, to get with the program of where America wants to go. They're still pushing the big lie. Now, he's complaining and trying to shift the blame on Nancy Pelosi and to substantiate Miss Marjorie Greene Taylor's aggravation about wearing the mask. Well, she doesn't want anybody to be on the floor without a mask because of safety reasons and because it does violate CDC.
It's interesting to me that they're trying to recreate a narrative, right? And so what should have been about the people is now about one person. And that has been the narrative for the last 4 years. It has been about one person. And if you're not thinking for yourself, then that means you're allowing other people control your thought process. And so even though it looks obvious that they're being controlled by one thought process, they've been so creative in how they have controlled the narrative that people are so disconnected and so disunified. They don't trust anybody. So that's part of the scheme. Don't trust anybody, but you could trust us.
Adolf Hitler technique, Mein Kampf.
Absolutely.
Yes. Well, what we've been experiencing is that the Code of 45, because I'm not even saying his name anymore, the Code of 45 is that he become a leader of, to the point where, he is out of office, thank God, finally out of office, thank God, yet they feel themselves bewildered, separation anxiety, that he had to come to Mar-a-Lago to kiss the ring. And I'm look, he didn't kiss the ring. He may have kissed another part of Trump's anatomy, but he definitely didn't kiss the ring. Okay, but
don't ever think that he's not still calling the shots. Don't ever think that he's not a player. He is an active component in what they're doing. And in their mind, their truth is he'll be back. So their sense of loyalty to him is not going to change. And it doesn't matter when you are being held hostage to a lie. It doesn't matter what current reality is, because you're always going to pledge allegiance. And so that's a form of control manipulation. And the problem is a lot of people who are not following it, but there are enough people who are.
Well, here is what, because they are so busy focusing and controlling the lie, they're not seeing the truth. In the last election, every of all the places that Trump went to, quote unquote, campaign for the Republicans so that he can keep the Senate, he lost. He lost. He's not looking at the truth. The fact of the matter is that now people are engaged and looking to actually make change. That a lot of people are not following the rhetoric of the lie. A lot of people are not believing that the virus is going away, especially when we're at over 500,000 people dead. Now, a lot of people are not believing that, the ballots are stolen, but yet we still have pockets of this flaring up. His theory in thinking that following Trump and keeping him relevant is going to be the death of the Republican Party.
I don't know. I don't know that it will be, because you got sex. I see sex of the Republican Party. There are those in the Republican Party who absolutely believe in the principles of what the Republican Party means. And then you have those extremists in the Republican Party who are just following along just to be a part of that group of that prior presidential administration. And so you have sex within the Republican Party. Now they can redeem themselves. And I'm not a Republican. There's some things about the Republican Party that I do agree with. There's some things I agree with, but there's no other option. You're either one thing, you're either blue or you're red. There's no purple. And if there was a purple, I'd be purple.
Yeah, isn't that purple called independent?
Yeah, but they have no authority. Like, you got to look at the narrative. The narrative is you're either blue or you're red, because that's where the power lies. So if everybody, now they would have authority if everybody who was like me, who sees value in both, became purple, then it would have some authority. But who's going to step out of the norm and be the sacrificial lamb? Because it is brutal. It is brutal to be a leader right now, because they pick at everything.
Oh, well, let's look at the brutality.
Your pajamas when you were 5, like they look at everything.
Yeah, look, they've even called my college professor. So believe me, I know how truly mean people can be.
Oh, yes.
Yet here's the thing in which when we pick and elect our leaders, one thing that I don't want is a chumpy leader. I don't want a weak-minded leader. I want someone to actually always have my back. That's why I voted for him. Yet the Republican Party has sat up there and rewarded people for continuing the big lie because they want to keep Trump as their leader, a man who lost. Yet they now are starting to punish people who publicly say the truth.
They are.
Said the exact thing that Kevin McCarthy said. The exact thing. But once he started to jump ship and run back to Trump, and she started again publicly saying the same thing that he said, they punished her for telling the truth.
I think there's another level for her, though, because she's a woman. And so you can never take out the gender issues that come with being a woman, because I can say one thing and you can say another, but because you're a man, it will be received. Because it's coming from me, then I'm all kind of bees and I'm trying to be this and I'm trying to be that. So when you come with authority and you come with a sense of self as a woman, then they minimize that. So look at our new vice president. She is minimized because she's a woman. If a man stepped and did what she did, then it would be glorified. So we still, not only do we have critical race theory, we need to have some gender critical theory as well, because that's always an underlying presupposition that the dream of America was for white men. Women had to fight their way back. Brown people had to fight their way back. So it's designed to be divisive.
It is designed to be divisive. And yet, once we have that clash, you think they're going crazy about critical race theory. Just look and understand what's going to happen when in our schools they start to teach them the vagina monologue. Okay?
Oh, my Lord.
It's over.
That's going to be interesting.
Yeah. Yet it does happen. Yet we still have work to do. And one of the most important things that I believe that we should start working on, and it really pains me when our president and our vice president got up there and says that America is not a racist country. What we actually have to do is stop with the microaggressions, but confront them every time. I think that and confront them to actually tell the truth. It took me an hour and a half on social media one day to express to them the critical race theories and how they treated the young girl who had that little dollar store steak knife and the cop killed her, versus the young boy who went to the Black Lives Matter rally with a semi-automatic rifle and began killing people.
Yes. But it's interesting that you say that they say America is not a racist country. And so I would say to that the foundation, the original America was a racist country. Where we are today, we have sects of racism in the country. We have a systemic evil that's in the country. But I would say that overall, America is a diverse country. So I think it's semantics. I think it's depending on what you're laser focused on. If you look at the makeup of the country, you would say, okay, people have access. Now, there's still some underlying presuppositions, some underlying racist systems in America. So I just think they're trying to parse it out. Because if you say we're in a racist country and you're a Black woman as the vice president, and you're saying racism is still, we're a racist country, that is contradictory to what you are a lived experience of. Because if it was a racist country, we wouldn't have a Black president. We wouldn't have a Black vice president. Now, the systems in place that allowed her to be where she was, absolutely. Some of them are racist, but you can't blanket the whole thing and you're trying to move forward and say something, because everybody in America is not racist. And so I think that's why they said that. Everybody in America is not racist. We have systems that are racist, but everybody in America is not racist.
Here is my opinion. Racism isn't the cause of the ills in America. Racism is just one of the biggest symptoms. Okay, because we look at the situation of why we have the two-party system. And a lot of people say and believe that we have the two-party system because of racism. No, we don't have the two-party. In my opinion, we don't have the two-party system because of racism. We have the two-party system because of power. Had power because they had slaves who were the commodities of their wealth. The North decided to actually take away the party of the South, or the power of the South, by abolishing slavery.
Yeah, it's all about power. Just like rape is not about sex, it's about power.
Exactly. But yet we still fight with the symptom, and we never truly get to the root cause. The problem that we have with critical race theory, in my aspect, is because critical race theory gives a lot of white kids the true version of how the white race has come into power and how they are also benefiting from that, called white privilege. And
I would imagine, as we talk about PTSD, right? Let's talk about what it does to a white child who learns that they come from systemic evil, that their ancestors enslaved people. Imagine what kind of emotional response they would have to that everything you thought was glorious about being white has been a lie. Now, how do you combat that? What kind of therapy would be in place for a white person who has learned that their parents own people? Like, how do you do that?
Well, let's look at the empathetic aspect of getting to them to understand that, the way you feel right now and learning that new information is the same feeling a lot of Black children have felt when they found out that their ancestors were owned by yours.
Exactly. Now, you could do that, but you can't minimize one person's experience to elevate another. So that means that there needs to be a therapeutic thing in place for white people who are now coming to the knowledge of the truth, and not compare that to the Black experience, because their white experience is just as painful for them in their context as it is for us in our context. And we can't compare the two.
Yeah, that's like comparing, what do they say? The biggest argument that I've had in Lama's class is expressing to a group of women that you can't compare pain because, you between men and women, you ask them which is more painful, childbirth or being kicked in the testicles.
I would imagine childbirth.
See, because you can't imagine being kicked in the testicles.
I can imagine testicles opening 10 centimeters.
Okay, and I can't imagine the I can't.
Exactly.
can't imagine something 10 centimeters coming out of any orifice in my body. But
Exactly.
yet it does happen. That's the same thing with the feeling of guilt, anxiety, and pain.
Yes.
When we start to tell our children that they're coming from systemic evil, where they thought and believed that the other one was evil. So we have now victimized the oppressor.
So there's no system in place. So you got to look at how this plays out. There's no system in place that I've seen. There's no system in place to be able to say to these white children, now what? What do they do? Because they're going back home to privilege, yet they're going to school with people that they are now the beneficiaries of their oppression. What do you do with those kids? What do you tell them really?
Well, start to understand a little human kindness or actually, let's now start teaching them with critical race theory, humanity and understand.
Yeah. I mean, we can. I think we have to think through that some more to say, what do we do now? How do we do, like, if you have a child who has a black mother and a white father, or a white mother and a black father, where do they fall? Are they white? They black? Because historically they're black, but they're just as much white as they are black. And then where do they fit? They have to choose a side. Why do they have to choose a side?
Well, growing up, people used to ask me to choose a side because I came from the same thing. And people wanted to know, well, what do you call yourself, black or white? And I said, generally, I answer to Vincent.
Right. So there has to be a new narrative. And so now you got to figure out who's going to create that narrative without the bias, without the racism, without the intentionality of wanting to be one up. Like, who writes that narrative?
Well, let's hope that narrative is not written by the other ones, the same people that wrote the old narrative.
Exactly.
One of the biggest reasons that critical race theory is going to be difficult to get into school is because our schools are still using books, which were therefore approved by the Daughters of the Confederate. We are teaching our children that these white children are the master race consistently. This is the only society who every movement is dictated by the losers.
Exactly. So therein lies our challenge. What do we do with that truth?
Let's look at
As
that.
brown people, why have we allowed the master to train our children? Why have we allowed them to acculturate them into this society?
Quote Malcolm X for you. Only a fool will let his enemies teach his children.
And so now the truth has to be, everybody has to come to the knowledge of the truth. Those on the side of oppression and those on the side of the oppressor. Everybody has an accountability. Mm-hmm. After all these years, we're still having the same conversation.
Yes, but I'm tired of having this conversation. Let's move into action. Dr. Lang, as we end this show, please tell people, how can they reach out to you?
So you can reach out to me on Facebook. My Facebook is Ashellarine Lang. My Twitter is @RevShella. My Instagram is Dr. Ashellarine. My website is www.empoweredtobegreat.com, or you can just put Ashellarine.com, or you could just Google me. If you Google me, you'll see everything I've done.
Oh, yes.
Especially
her episodes on the Three Wise Ones. Dr. Ashellarine.
Yes.
Dr. Lang, it has been very interesting, very exciting, and very entertaining having you on our show.
It's been my pleasure.
I hope one day you can come back.
I will.
Well, in terms of the topics and discussions that we had, and as passionate as they may be, one thing that Dr. Ashellarine said rings true in my ear. We need to move forward and have a plan to action. Our hearts and prayers go out to the victims, survivors, and family members of our last mass shooting. But we have to look at if we don't make changes, then this doesn't change. At some point in time, years ago, if there were 232 mass shootings in America, we would be alarmed. We would be up in arms. And gun control would be one of the biggest topics. But one of the things that we actually have to control is ourselves. Control ourselves to look at our brother and see if he's okay. To look at our family members and see how they're weathering. Yes, people like to fake and feather that, there are some people doing better in this pandemic, but we are all in this and we're all dealing with the consequences of this pandemic, either economical, emotional, social. We are all dealing with the consequences of this, the violence, the starvation, the worry, the frustration. We are all dealing with the consequences of this pandemic. So if we're all dealing with it, let's make those consequences a lot lighter. Look at your brother, ask your brother, reach out to them. Even though they have gotten their shots, there are still some underlying issues that they may still be dealing with. As Jesus once said, be kind.